Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kelly McCormick. I am the behind-the-scenes coordinator for some of the webinars that FAU College Business is putting on this summer to connect with the community. And I want to thank David Menachof and our guests for joining us today, and I will hand it over to David to introduce our guests and get the discussion going.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And I'm glad so many of you are able to come out today and join the webinar. As Kelly said, I'm David Menachof. I'm an associate professor in the Information Technology and Operations Management group, and my specialty is supply chain management. And been at FAU for 3 years now, starting my 4th, having spent over 20 years over in the UK teaching over there. But I'm a University of Tennessee graduate and several years of industry experience. Abbott Laboratories finished goods distribution was one of my first jobs. Then I worked for a liner shipping company and a few years with a cruise line, both in the office, shoreside, and on board the ships as a purser. So a bit of wide variety there. For myself, let me now introduce one of our panelists is Matt Tichon. He's the Vice President of Industry Strategy at LlamaSoft, where he helps customers and prospects overcome various supply chain strategy, forecasting, planning, and design challenges. Matt started his career as a supply chain network design consultant before moving into the software and industry roles. Before LlamaSoft, Matt held senior supply chain positions at Oracle, Clariant Corporation, and Arby's. He also has more than 20 years of experience in manufacturing, consulting, and technology, and demonstrates repeated successes in leading supply chain transformation. Matt has a BSBA in logistics management from Central Michigan University. Our other panelist is Art Koch. Art is president of Koch Management Consulting. He has over 20 years of results-oriented business transformation leadership experience gained throughout the US, Canada, Mexico, South America, and Europe. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies for consumer products, top-tier automotive suppliers, aerospace and defense, electronics and electrical and mechanical, as well as wholesale and distribution. So basically the whole supply chain. Prior to entering consulting, he filled the role of Vice President of Supply Chain Management for companies that are global leaders in their industry. His expertise is in implementation and application of supply chain solutions for ERP, forecasting and inventory planning, sales and operations planning, organizational re-engineering, and lean synchronous practices. Art has his Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from University of Michigan and an MBA in Supply Chain and Operations Management from Michigan State University. So those are our panelists. And what I want to do is just get straight into it in this quick hour that we're going to have today. And first, remind people if they are on the viewing this that they may want to open their chat window if they want to type in questions that we'll be able to try to cover later in our hour. But as we said, this program was about, did COVID-19 break the supply chain? And so I want to kind of toss that out there, give it to Art first, and then let Matt add in on that.
I would say no, it did not break the supply chain, but I really think it stretched it, showed how elastic it is, and at the same time showed us how fragile our supply chains are across the world. I additionally think leaders come to recognize the importance of lead time compression, where they did not understand that prior, and at the same time have a new appreciation of what I call TOC, or the total cost of ownership. So no, I don't think supply chains have were broken per se, but I think they were extremely stressed, and we learned a lot from that.
Okay, and Matt?
Yeah, I concur. I don't think supply chains are broken, but they're absolutely stretched to, in certain cases, breaking points. And when this COVID hit, we saw such rapid increases in demand. We start to see the weak links in the supply chains come to the surface. So that has really been highlighted. And I think from consumers, we see a lot of that, right? Even the average consumer sees a lot of the challenges around supply chain. And one of the things that COVID-19 has done, they've made supply chain for people like us a household word. It's great. I used to have to explain to people would ask me what I did for a living. I'm like, you really don't want to know. And I'd start discussing supply chain after about a minute. They're like, you're right. I really didn't want to know. You could have just said you're a business guy. So now it's interesting because people I talk to when I say I'm a supply chain, now they're asking me questions. They're interested in what's going on. So it's been good for the profession, and it's elevated it to really the C-level executive suite to the CEO. Supply chain is on top of everybody's minds. So supply chain wasn't necessarily broken, but it did highlight a lot of weak links and a lot of areas where we need to shore up and do some additional work in our supply chains.
Okay, no, I'll agree with that it's brought supply chain to the forefront. I've been quite involved, and just to note, our FAU Business School will be starting a Master of Science in Supply Chain Management. It was recently approved by our Board of Trustees, and as the person leading the effort, I had to go to quite a few approval meetings with many of these folks from other parts of the university, but just this spring, and every one of them have all of a sudden heard supply chain in the news, and the approval process went probably easier than any other degree from what I've been told. So yes, it has elevated it, and I think the big thing about supply chain prior to this is when it works, it's silent and in the background, and you don't think about it because it does work. So yes, I agree with both of you there. One thing that I wanted to find out, were there any surprise learnings that came out of this situation? I know we had the discussions and a lot of stuff on the news where they're showing Walmart with absolutely nothing in the paper goods aisle, no toilet paper, no, kitchen paper. But were there any surprise findings that came through here? And I can go back to Art.
Okay. I think one of the biggest surprise learnings for me, there's kind of two of them. One of them was how fast organizations or the clients I work with, I can't speak for all organizations, but the clients I work with, how fast they cut through red tape. All right. They surgically, I call it surgically cut through red tape. And to me, that was very profound because I work on, pretty decent size change management within their companies. And it goes many times at a snail's pace. But when COVID hit, how fast we turned $1 billion business and a $2 billion business 180 degrees on their sourcing strategies to where we could keep the stock shelved. And then the other thing that I really was impressed with is American ingenuity is still alive. If you take a look at what General Motors did with ventilators and what Dyson did with ventilators, just the core engineering strength of American businesses and how fast they turn, that was very, very impressive. So it gives me a lot of faith in what I see going forward in American industry.
Okay, and Matt.
Yeah, I think COVID has been surprising in some certain ways, and we see how fragile our inventories are. When I went through business school, we looked at inventory as an asset. We were just taught on the balance sheet, inventory is an asset. And the funny thing, as soon as I moved into corporate America, it seemed like inventory was liability. As a supply chain practitioner, I was given pressure from the CFO and top down to don't have inventory. I'm like, it's an asset for us, but from a working capital standpoint, a lot of companies really want to minimize working capital, and they have strategies to do that. I think one of the surprises that we all got is how lean and how efficient some of these supply chains are, right? Where we have literally weeks of supply in an entire supply chain, and just a couple hiccups can cause a big disruption. I'm also was pleasantly surprised, and I'm sure Art can identify with this one. You know, going back a couple months ago, is we have these manufacturing companies, and Art mentioned a few that really turned their organizations on their head to help out, to retool, to come to the aid of the American people with critical equipment such as ventilators. I'd be on calls with the executives. They'd have bags under eyes. They'd be sleeping 4 hours a day. The chief supply chain officers, the VP of supply chains, were almost going sleepless, running off caffeine. This adage that, you know, the people in the executive suite are just sitting around playing golf was completely thrown out the window. I saw such a passion of our executive leaders saying, look, we've got people who need jobs. We want to help in any way we can. Our factories are shut down because they're not mission critical, but we want to retool so we can get some of our people employed. We can get lines back and running. We can help the effort. I saw executive after executive just literally bags under their eyes, 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, doing whatever they possibly could to help what's the word I'm looking for? To operationalize and to mobilize their workforce in whatever way they could and cut around red tape to get their workforce back in operation and up and running. So I was pleasantly surprised to see the dedication. And it really comes back to that ingenuity, the American, you know-how of when we see a crisis, we stand up and we perform and we find solutions.
Okay. Art, did you want to add something?
No, that's good. That's good.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll add very quickly, down at Port Everglades, you know, when they had to shut down for a little bit as a result of this, and just keeping everything going, and how do you move cargo with the social distancing issues going on, and getting cargo first in and out of the gate into the port and inland was something that they were, you know, having to struggle with. So, but as you say, they were working basically 24 hours a day there to keep it running, and hopefully, you know, we're seeing that play out as it fills, let's say, those voids where we had stockouts that are now filling in.
You know, David, one of the things that was really nice to see on the news is how our truckers have been recognized. You know, they've been, you know, truckers, just a normal standard, you know, blue collar job. But lately, in the past 3 months, how much they've been recognized. And that's nice to see people in the trades being recognized. And we need to have more of that in today's culture.
Okay. I just saw in the chat window, it basically leads right on to the next question. It's saying, what, you know, what obstacles should we consider if COVID stays with us for 2 years? And my next question was really going to say, you know, if we have this second and third wave of the virus, but what about the second and third wave of shortages?
Matt, you want to go first, or you want me to?
I'll take that one. You know, if it stays with us for 2 years, I'm gonna, you know, put it out there. It's here for 2 years. It's probably here for 4 or 5. I think it's going to be a long time before we're back to some semblance of normalcy. And I think just like the Twin Towers, you know, changed forever, you know, security screening at airports and what TSA does, I really think COVID-19 is going to forever change as a society how we operate and how we do things. You know, until there, even if there is ever a vaccine that's effective, that gives a long-term, you know, solution for this, and that's probably years off. Minus what we hear in the press, it's probably years off. So we'll be dealing with this for a while, and there's a lot of good problem solving going on. I think, you know, the question is, when you get into manufacturing facilities, we've heavily concentrated manufacturing into large super centers, right? We saw this in poultry manufacturing. You see this in automotive manufacturing. You see this in industries where we're trying to get efficiencies and economies of scale. So we have a lot of people in small areas, and it's finding ways to protect those workers and make that environment safe so you can have people working next to each other. You can have people coming into the factory, because we've seen so many factories that shut down because one person tests positive for COVID. They close the factory down for a week or two. They do deep cleaning, they do contract tracing, then they slowly bring these factories up one shift at a time. So I think really for the next 2 years, and I'm speaking from a manufacturing implications, more the supply side of supply chain, I think we as a leaders need to really come to best practices of how to assure occupational workplace safety in the era of having a virus that we just don't know how to stop right now, minus physical barriers.
Yeah. For for me, what I see happening, if you go back and you take a look at the first wave, David uses the term the first wave. First wave, we were hit with toilet paper, hand sanitizer were the major shortages. And that's because there is this, as Matt mentioned earlier, our supply chains were very, very efficient before COVID hit. Then all of a sudden, we had this extreme demand variability that happened within our demand structures on toilet paper and sanitary products or hand sanitizer. So what I see happening, I see this is going to be a ripple effect. The next thing that we're going to have is, because we're shutting down, or our our lead times and our supply chains are so long, I see the next phase being our prescription drugs, that we're going to be hit with shortages. We're going to see that in prescription antibiotic, things like insulin. Then after we work that through and we get our arms around it, I think there's going to be a third phase somewhere out there in another 180 days to a year, where we're going to see shortages within rare earths and key raw materials, and even silicon wafers. Because if you kind of go back in history and you start looking back 24, 36 months, there was a huge globalization that happened across the world. And globalization started slowing down. And I think we hit the peak of what I read somewhere around 2016, 2017, we hit the peak. Then we started seeing a contraction of that, where countries were pulling their manufacturing back in because they realized the total cost was too high of shipping it from halfway around the world. Within that, you throw the black swan effect of COVID-19, and that just disrupted this whole process. So now what we have is, we have countries that are thinking of me first. We saw that with PPE, the extreme shortages within that. And so we're going to see that next in prescription drugs, the antibiotics, things like insulin. Then that's going to flow through rare earths. So we need to really be diligent of how we're going to structure our key suppliers and what manufacturing we're going to bring back to the United States.
Yeah, I can concur with Art. I'm connected to one of the largest in a professional organization, real estate companies that will source and procure real estate for manufacturing facilities, warehouses, et cetera. And they're getting a lot of inquiries from pharmaceutical manufacturers asking about land, asking about space to manufacture here on the North American continent. And I was looking at some notes. China has 15% of the world's manufacturing facilities that manufacture the active pharmaceutical ingredients for 370 drugs. The U.S. has 21% of those facilities. And this was a shocking quote I saw this morning. Let me read this quote to you. It says that says the U.S. has 21% of those facilities, according to the FDA, but the agency doesn't know how much those facilities produce, or if they produce anything at all. And this is what it says. What is the threat to our national health care if there is some kind of geopolitical issue or an outbreak like this, or some kind of natural disaster? We really don't know. This is Michael Gano, Director of Pharmacy Practice and Quality at the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. So it's interesting that we see some shortages, and I think one of the things that's talked about is antibiotics aren't produced here in the U.S. And when you have reliance on foreign countries to provide all our antibiotics, that's an issue of national security. So
Absolutely.
I think we're going to see, when you look at our whole military that is at any outbreak they come across in the military, we have to depend on foreign sources of antibiotics. So as we started this off, I said it's brought the weak links in the supply chain to the surface. And I think our government's starting to recognize that. And we need to get into a place where we need to start manufacturing some of these mission critical products, PPE, pharmaceuticals for the safety and health of our population within the United States of America. And while I'm a huge proponent and advocate of free markets, supply and demand, it works. You know, this entrepreneurial spirit where there's a need in the market, capitalism rides up, businesses start. It may take a little bit while, but we adjust quickly. Just much like in our government organization, you know, has OSHA, and they have guidelines for workplace, you know, safety and healthcare guidelines that might not otherwise be completely practiced by all companies. I think there's going to need to be some supply chain, you know, Patriot security type of acts put in process where they say, look, for these key APIs for pharmaceutical manufacturing, we need to have the government step in and do a little bit of regulation to say, hey, X% has to be made in the US. We can do some foreign sourcing, but if you even take a 60-40 split and produce 60 in the US and 40%, you know, internationally, if we have an outbreak, if we have a supply line shut down, then we can start to run extra shifts. We can ramp up production here in the US and take care of our own population. I think we all want to be good, you know, global trading partners, but at the end of the day, our governments or the government's responsibility is first primary to the people that they govern. So I think we're going to see some changes in some legislation, or hopefully we will, that come through to help protect this, help protect our country, to make sure we have these mission critical goods in times of disruptions. Because disruptions, they're happening. You know, tsunamis happen, hurricanes happen, COVID-19 happens. It's not the matter of if this will happen again. It's a question of when and what will the next event be.
And
I was just going to point out, one of the folks also talked a little bit about Puerto Rico, and in our kind of preparation meeting, we actually started talking about that as one of the focal points for healthcare products. And now, you know, again, do we have the right incentives? Maybe not regulation, but create those incentives that will encourage the manufacturers to come back before mandating. And, you know, if we could do it naturally through incentives that companies want to take advantage of, rather than force them to at potentially a loss-making situation. Because obviously these companies are looking for profits, and in, again, pre-COVID times, you go to the lowest cost location for the long-term. Supply chains were operating with no problem up to this point. But do we make that change at this point in time? Is this that inflection point that says, now that COVID-19 has occurred and until we get that vaccine, do we need the change, or is it going to be changed going forward for years to come?
well, David, if I can jump in, I agree totally with Matt. I think there's a legislative approach that we need to have for PPE and pharmaceuticals and other products. Within the Department of Defense, they do have that. It's called the Berry Amendment and the Kissel Amendment, where it has to be manufactured stateside, or I think with NATO countries. I'm not exactly sure on NATO, but I know stateside. However, when you take a look at our supply chains, I feel it's a misnomer. I call it a herd mentality that happened for about 30 years, where American industry run to what they call low-cost countries. What they were doing was chasing low-cost labor. And labor is a small percentage of the overall mix or the cost of the product that goes out. And I think I know our American leaders or our American industrial leaders have to do a better job of operational excellence. And if they do a better job of operational excellence, they can reduce the total cost of ownership by shortening the supply chains, shortening the amount of inventory in the process. Because inventory, as Matt talked about, he was taught inventory is an asset. I was taught inventory is a liability. The more inventory you have, the more costly it is. And depending on where the inventory is at within your supply or the type of product it's in, the inventory carrying cost on items can be as high as $1 for dollar. And it's usually somewhere in the neighborhood, if you look at the total cost of ownership, somewhere in the range of 38 to 58%, depending on your product. Then additionally, that we have to look at within the United States, it was just a few short months ago, pre-COVID, we were at a zero unemployment rate. All right. And I know we had a 3.2 or a 3.1%, but the true unemployment rate was essentially zero because anybody that really wanted to work was working. So now we're talking about reshoring all this product. And if we're going to reshore all this product, where's the labor going to come from? All right, we are going to need labor. So we have to look at automation, robotics, 3D printing, and finding labor within the United States that we could get retooled and trained. Additionally, over the last 30 years, with all this offshoring that's happened, we've decimated the industrial complex of America. Everything from training, education, roadways, railways, as Matt talked about, real estate. We have to build factories, and that's a lot of work. So it's nothing that's going to happen overnight. One last thing, and I'll let you guys go to where I can catch my breath, is manufacturing isn't sexy to our young kids. The generation of kids that are out there, it's not something that's attractive, exciting. It doesn't have swagger for them. And we have to turn it into something that's exciting for them to draw talent in. When you watch the nightly news, what do you see when they talk manufacturing? They show a foundry with sparks flying, casting operations with sparks flying, or smokestacks with smoke coming out. I haven't been in a factory like that in 10 years or 15 years. The factories I go in, you can almost eat off the floor. And individuals don't realize how exciting and how rewarding a career in operations or in manufacturing can be. Some of the best CNC operators I've ever met are some of the best race car drivers I've ever met or motocrossers I've ever met, because these guys and gals are extremely talented. And I think we need to shift the misnomer that university is the only way to go. There's great careers in the trade.
I was just going to, you pointed it out, these manufacturing or the factories, again, the pictures of these old factories in the Rust Belt, again, people don't want those jobs. But we're not really showing these modern, clean factories where you do need a different level of skill. You do need that training to use this automation, robotics, and so on. It'll be less labor, but it'll be more highly trained labor. So you're right, we do need to shift. But the other question is, do we need, or will there be a permanent shift from the services, hospitality industry as a result of this, where those now people who are unemployed are going to look to other careers?
I want to say yes, because I think there needs to be a three-prong approach. Families or our society, American society, we need to look at telling kids and young people that manufacturing is a viable career. Industry needs to look at operational excellence to where they're not trying to build the jobs with all kinds of human labor and human content. It's more automation, more robotics. And through government, we need to incentivize training, education, and incentivize bringing in capital equipment. If we do that together as a society, we can compete better than anybody else in the world. Then on top of it, we have to look at building the product regionally. All right. If we build it regionally for regional customers, it's a win-win.
Okay,
Yeah,
Matt?
on automation, I was looking up some statistics from 2010 to 2018. The wage rate in China doubled. So as I look at this, question about bringing things back into the U.S. and would we have to pay a higher price, the economics are changing, right? We had companies, and we're the company I work for, we do global supply chain modeling and design, and we help companies make those decisions with advanced analytics of when is that tickle point? Do you stop making something internationally and bring it onshore? And as tariffs increase, the economics change. But also, we find a lot of companies understand the economics of labor are changing. So as you do automation, and you can automate here on American soil with equipment, your percent of labor is reduced, and you start to become competitive from a total product cost. One, because you don't have the transportation and shipping across the ocean. You don't have all that inventory tied up for 3 or 4 weeks on the books across the ocean. And also with automation, the overall amount of labor that's embedded in the purchase price of that product that you're selling comes down as well. So as you know, it's great for these countries. It's been a boom for their economies when a lot of the industrialized world has outsourced to their countries. But then over time, their wages start to come up as they industrialize. And
Exactly.
it's a different economics. So now it's to the point where it's making sense to bring things onshore, to nearshore things, to produce things regionally, and we're seeing a lot more of that happen. As a matter of fact, I looked at a survey this morning. This is an industrial manufacturing survey, and it went out to 1,000 companies here in North America. And it was a autonomous survey, and they were talking about COVID-19 impact on U.S. manufacturing industrial sectors. The survey respondents said 64% of manufacturers report they're likely to bring manufacturing, production, and sourcing back to North America. And we're seeing a lot of that in our client base itself. So I think the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see a manufacturing boom in this country. One of the things that I haven't heard talked about that I think about is labor. And not that hasn't been talked about, but when you look at restaurants and service workers in Las Vegas, when you look at the population that is unemployed right now because restaurants and hospitality industries are shut down, those industries are in very large metropolitan areas. I mean, a city like New York, Chicago, the amount of restaurant workers is amazing to deliver food, cook, bus tables, wait staff, managerials. So you have a lot of people in these very, very dense population centers. Those are not the places we build manufacturing plants. We build manufacturing plants where there's a lot of land, where land is inexpensive, where there's some access to labor. So there's going to need to be a migration of people that are willing to get out of their comfort zone and adjust to a new normal and saying, hey, we're going to go through a second industrial revolution here, if I want to call it that. I'm going to need to move to where those industries are propping up, to where those manufacturing plants, because that is where the economy is shifting, where I can re-employ, retool, have a good living for my family, and be a productive member of society. So I think you'll start to see populations that are willing to move, that are somewhat mobile, moving and migrating to where these large factories are going to be built in order to support them, because that's going to be where the wages and that's where the labor is. I really haven't heard that talked about, but it's going to require people to think pretty hard about, why do I live in this city when there's no jobs here? And we start to see that. We're seeing, I think, 500,000 people have moved out of New York City already to the far suburbs, and they're like, we're not going to go back because there's really no reason to be there if we're under lockdown, because we can't enjoy anything the city has to offer. So I think we're going to see a population shift, move, as these jobs are created in order to attract that workforce.
Well, Matt, I feel COVID-19 is the catalyst for that.
Yep.
I say this all the time, and you hear about setting the minimum wage at $15 an hour, and it's an issue associated with like restaurants, etc. They Since when did a job at a McDonald's become a career destination? All right. And it's become a career destination because over the past 30 years, we've gutted American manufacture with these middle class jobs. So if we retool and reindustrialize America, train and educate people, we'll pull them out of those substandard jobs and build a great middle class again. All right.
You're spot on. There's a big wage differentiation right now. We see the top and the bottom getting farther and farther. I was talking about that exact point, Art. I'm glad to hear you say that. This should be a middle class boom. If we do this right, the middle class should grow exponentially, and a lot more wealth created in this country and more of the America you grew up with, right?
Yep. Yep. And just kind of bouncing off that a little bit, what we have to do to sustain this long term are senior executives in companies, they have to understand the total cost of ownership and the cost of carrying inventory. And if you look at why we've been able to be successful with these long supply chains is because of the increase in technology, the increase in ability of forecasting. Programs like Lamasoft, SAP, they've improved our capability to build these long supply chains. But with that, it caused them to be fragile. And I'm going to just give you a couple different numbers. As I was talking about, I look at inventory as being, it's not being an asset, it's a liability to an organization. And what I always do is I work with clients to reduce their need or the reliance on forecast. I want to use a forecast to plan raw materials. I don't want to use a forecast to plan finished goods. I want to use the actual pull or the actual demand from the customer to build from. But here's an interesting statistic. Since 2004-5 timeframe, beverage inventory across, and this is taking it to 2019, pre-COVID numbers, has went up 76 days or 70%. Pharmaceutical inventory has went up 51 days or 31%. Medical device, 45 days or 42%. On average, across industry, our inventory has went up 31% in the past almost 2 decades, past 15 years. And to me, that's scandalous because it adds such a cost to business. And what we have to do, and you're seeing what's happened with the supply chains, this cost. And so what we have to do is we have to get our senior executives to understand the increasing or this cost to the business and pull in our supply chain lead times, drop that inventory, become more responsive, become more flexible. And with that, the total cost of ownership it significantly drops. And then we can compete worldwide.
Yeah, and you see, with inventory going up, there's certain industries that inventory is not even a major thought to their executive staff. When you look at launching drugs, when you look at pharmaceutical, medical device, the margins are so high, they tend to say, just put a whole bunch of inventory in stock. And we look at it and we're like, there's no way you'll ever need that. Like, it's a rounding error in the books. But when you look at it, it does make an economic difference, right? So I think there's needs to be a lot more discipline within these industries of saying, we can shave that out substantially without hurting your service levels and looking at demand variation. So that's where these tools allow, instead of this, gut feel decision making with the data science tools that are out there now, you can look at data and make data driven decisions. And that's what we preach all the time, right?
Yeah.
Make data driven decisions and say, I was working with a tier 1 OEM manufacturer of a critical component for cars. Their goal is to reduce their global inventory by 35%. And we looked at their numbers, we looked at their demand variability, and we said, absolutely, it's doable without even sacrificing your service levels. So, I mean, there's still a lot of, it's hard to believe, as much time as we spent on supply chain over the last 2 decades, there's a lot of opportunity, even for young graduates, to make a huge impact on companies, just understanding the basics of inventory and how much inventory you need to buffer against uncertainty. What is your uncertainty? What are your lead times? Because you use inventory to buffer lead times as well. So these, as you guys start an MBA, David, I'm in supply chain. I'm excited because, it's one of the reasons I went into supply chain when I looked at other people graduating with marketing degrees and waiting tables, and I said, that's not what I want. And the supply chain program was 100% placement, right? And to this day, supply chain grads are just getting scooped up like crazy. It's a great ROI for an education. And there's so much work that still needs to be done at this day. I'm amazed at the household companies I go into that are well run that still have a ton of opportunity for supply chain improvements.
Well,
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, I get emails from LinkedIn that show me supply chain jobs. to give me ideas that we can put our graduates at some point. And there are a lot of supply chain jobs here in South Florida, yet alone the US. So in spite of so much unemployment, this field is underserved, that the skills aren't there. One question, though, I wanted to ask, and a couple people have started bringing it up in terms of this aspect of, is it just bringing back manufacturing to the US, or with our the new North American trade agreement, do we bring it to Canada or Mexico as part of this, or do we look at alternative aspects, because there were other global events, for example, the tsunami in Japan and the French car manufacturer PSA, as a result of that, because certain components were disrupted, started to require their suppliers to have dual sourcing in different regions of the world. So not just, let's say, in Southeast Asia manufacturing this product, but maybe put a factory in Brazil, so that if a disruption occurs going forward, that supply may not be at 100% of what they normally have, but at least supply keeps going as opposed to a direct shutdown. And I think what made, obviously, the COVID-19 is that this impacted the world at one time, unlike the hurricane, unlike a snowstorm, unlike earthquake. So that most effects of global disruption tend to be regionalized, whereas this became a complete global effect all at once. So thinking about, is this a black swan event that we're going to focus on, and in some way, I don't really want to say knee-jerk reaction, but are we going to focus on it if once we get past this, if once the vaccine comes through, we may not have another pandemic again for a period of time in our lifetimes. So, are we going to move back? Because your discussion just a few minutes ago, both of you talking about, we have too much inventory, and yet all of a sudden we're running out. And I remember my days at Abbott Laboratories with finished goods distribution. The biggest problem was we had too much of the wrong stuff and sometimes not enough of the right stuff. And so it's always playing around with your manufacturing to make the right stuff and not get stuck with the wrong stuff in the warehouses.
Well, and David, that's a result of manufacturing to forecast. When you have an extensive supply chain with a long lead time from the supplier to the final customer, you have a huge reliance on forecast. And what you have to do is you have to compress that to where you're not reliant on your forecast. Going back to your earlier question, I don't think we should not do a knee-jerk reaction and think we're going to bring it all back, because there's a group of things. One thing is we don't have the labor to do it. The second thing is we don't have the infrastructure to do it. The third element is doesn't make sense to bring it all back, because there's certain items that don't make sense to bring back. You have to bring back things that do make sense. And I'm a big advocate of manufacturing or final assembly localized. So if you take a look at beverages, Coca-Cola, that is bottled locally. There's a bottling plant in South Florida. There's different bottling plants for major metropolitan areas. So you want to look at how that is done. And I would say a regional or localized manufacturing for the products that are used there. And as you look at the new agreement between Canada, United States, and Mexico, we're friendly with one another. Right, and the distances aren't halfway around the world. So there's nothing, there's no reason why you cannot have a candy manufacturer, one in the East Coast of the United States, one on the border, and maybe on the West Coast of the United States or the West Coast of Canada, take care of all the United States. So I think that's how you have to look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Matt?
agree. Can you guys hear me better?
Yes.
All right, good. Sorry about that. Yeah, when it comes to redundancy, especially in automotive, we saw examples where that primary manufacturing facility had a redundant facility in their procurement plans, and it was 100 miles up the road in the same province from the primary manufacturing facility, the secondary. And those were the days when we wanted to hedge against what if there's a catastrophic fire, right? If a facility goes offline, we've got redundant capacity 100 miles up the road. COVID's really changed that. Now we think of supply chain resiliency in the terms of larger level disruptions. So, the challenge is, as we look at this, is global sourcing makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases, but it's making sure you have some redundancy, and maybe it's in different, areas of the world. I listened to a recent, where was I? The RELA, the Real Estate Leaders in Action. I'm sure I didn't get the acronym right, but the last conference I went to before COVID, and the CEO of Levi's came and he addressed the audience. And he said Levi's was in a great position to handle COVID, the coming, pandemic. And this is right before we went through lockdowns. I think the statistic he used, they don't make any more than 15% of their global jeans in any one continent or country. So, to Art's point, they're producing regionally for those regional markets. They have a broad world of manufacturing facilities. And when they had a facility go down, they could pick up the slack in other facilities. So, and obviously that makes more sense in very large scale, operations. But, having the tools and the analytics to say, when does that make financial sense and when doesn't it? That's been a real game changer, is how we apply AI and advanced analytics to help companies make these data-driven decisions, so we can say, of the products you're producing, here is your exposure level, here's the risk, here's the economics behind these decisions, and really making these decisions in a 3D environment. So you'll hear the term a digital twin of the supply chain. So that's catching a lot of momentum as we create digital models of the supply chain that are both horizontal, that go from customer back to your suppliers, and then vertically deep in these models where we look at manufacturing capabilities or flows and how much can go across different nodes of the supply chain, and we can start testing things out in a simulated environment, much like a flight instructor does in a cockpit, right? They go through a lot of scenarios and they can understand what the capabilities of the aircraft are, so if they're ever in that situation, they know how to respond. So what we're seeing is a lot of companies accelerating their efforts to build 3D models, digital supply chains, to test some scenarios and have a playbook already available saying, if tariffs increase on these goods by 10%, then we need to make a shift. So the horsepower is there, the compute power is there, the analytics is there now that wasn't there even 10 years ago, to start making these decisions data-driven in a simulated environment, instead of having to just go gut feel and go through these decisions more of an ad hoc basis. And that's been a real game changer in strategy for organizations on a global basis.
Just adding to that, if you look at one of the big challenges I see when I work with my clients and when I was in industry, is the lack of professionalism of supply chain individuals in organizations. And it's great a school like FAU has just added a master's in supply chain, because all the stuff Matt's talking about, this is, this is powerful thinking. We need smart young men and women doing this kind of work. This is just not something you pick up from off the street. All right. So one of the things with COVID that I really hope happens, that's an outcome of it, now supply chain is a household word and people understand what supply chain means. Now what we have to do is we have to increase the professionalism within supply chain. The people that are there that are educated in supply chain, they have to live up to what their education is. And at the same time, we have to bring in much better talent into businesses to where they can use these tools. And that has been absolutely missing. If you, so yeah.
Well, you're just
I could go on,
leading
but
it.
I'll quit preaching.
The next hour, we'll be talking about.
Well, you've just given me the perfect intro because the master's degree that we've designed is going to give a solid foundation in supply chain, but an additional focus with a core of business analytics, because we know that going forward, it's uh, the data-driven results that are going to help you make those right decisions. Again, the way of just making that decision in the warehouse, just make a few more, grab them off that shelf. We don't do that anymore. It's got to be known what's going on. I think,
Well,
exactly where we have that inventory, where we have the production capabilities, so it becomes not just one warehouse acting independently or one distribution center. I think you've got to take a network approach, and especially because of some of the comments here, it's not just bringing it back to the US, because a lot of these companies are selling globally, whether it's an
yeah,
American company selling
yeah,
overseas or
yeah,
overseas companies selling in the US with their other sales around the world. That, brands are global. And so is it are we going to see a much more intensive move to a network um, operation or approach?
yeah. I personally think that we have to dig into the total cost of ownership and understand and come up with the model that works for your business. But look at it, have it peer reviewed. Just don't look at it insular on what your total cost of ownership is. It needs to be peer reviewed to challenge you on your assumptions. Because when I see in businesses, there's a completely different cost of ownership for that last 1% of your sales and the complexity that it has to your business versus the top 80% of your sales. All right. So I think it comes down to that, and it's the analytics. Let me add something to what you're talking about with the how you're going to look at structuring the supply chain degree at FAU. One of the things that I see that I struggle with everywhere I go is there's a tremendous lacking in the knowledge of how to manage and how to sustain the fundamentals that get you to the high power tools that are there. All right. That's the thing that I see missing in virtually every organization I walk into. So we can talk offline about that, my solution for that, but we cannot discount that. And
Now,
I'm sure Matt runs into that with what he does in his career.
Yeah.
You know,
Data
garbage
analytics
in,
is
garbage out, and they're so fast chasing this new shiny object, and we're going to apply this new tool, but they cannot ever get the time to do it because they're working with so much bad data or bad processes they can't get to the real fun stuff.
Matt.
Yeah, no, I would say, machine learning is a great advancement in forecasting technologies. And we deploy those to some of our customers, but I say it's not a silver bullet. You can't just expect a machine learning algorithm to sit on top of your data and work magic. And I've been preaching this since I started. You got to do fundamentals of segmentation. There's a lot of products you should never even try to forecast. And Art talks about, what we know as DDMRP, demand driven replenishment planning, right? The Kanban systems. You don't fill the bucket up until the market empties it, then you fill the bucket back up, and you have a supply chain that responds to your customers' pulls of actually using that inventory. And I did that at Clariant. We took our whole division from a push-based manufacturing, where manufacturing was king and they forecasted and they just ran these plants full out. And they're only looking at one metric. They were looking at, their conversion costs, and the more units they made, the more efficient they were. In the supply chain, we're saying we have a 64% fill rate, which is miserable. We've got inventory up to wazoo, which is a technical term in supply chain. And this is insanity. And we went to a pull-based system, and I was leading a Lean Sigma project at the same time on OTIF, which is on time in full customer shipments. And we reduced our inventories by almost 40%, and we took our OTIF from like 64 to about 95%. So we took it over a third of our inventory out and radically increased our fill rates. But we didn't do it to say every single product we'll put on demand driven. We did a lot of analytics to say which products can we forecast well. Let's forecast those. Which products have enough variability where we can't forecast them well. Let's move to Kanbans. Let's move to pull-based systems. And we start off with a segmentation. And to this day, I struggle to find organizations who plan their supply chains differently, who actually do a good job of segmenting, have different planning strategies. And I see Art nodding his head. It's usually a one-size-fits-all approach. I hate to admit it, usually the larger the company, the worse it is. It doesn't make sense, but it's what I see. So these fundamentals of, those supply chain fundamentals of things like inventory strategy and segmentation, and then understanding how students can be a citizen data scientist where they don't have to have a data science degree, because tools are getting to the point where, these iPhones are the model. Apps are getting to the point where we're creating things that don't need a whole lot of expertise to use. We're making them easy to use. We're making them much more intuitive. So your citizen data scientist, and what is that? That's someone who's pretty good with Excel and analytics. It doesn't have to be a full data scientist, and they can use those new tools to get insights and data, because it's a click and drag process even to bring data into the system. You don't need to write SQL code anymore. So that fundamental parts of supply chain knowledge, coupled with understanding analytics and how to communicate successfully what analytics share within an organization, are crucial.
Okay, great. What I want to do, since we've just got a few more minutes left, is quickly look at some of the questions here. And one that I saw interesting here is the question says, how does some countries' success in eliminating COVID, New Zealand, for example, impact international supply chains? And, we're seeing Europe, especially like Italy, that had the big problem to begin with, seems to have dropped their curve, their rates, along with the rest of Europe. How does that affect the way we go forward?
I'll just jump in real quickly. I think we have to look at best practices from other nations. And I think there's great things about America, this entrepreneurial spirit, kind of a cowboy mentality, if you will, does great things in a lot of circumstances. But when it comes to conformity, everyone conforming to a new norm, it's a little bit of a struggle in our culture, right? We're more of a free spirit, independent, adventurous spirit. So I think, as these other countries that have more of a collective mentality, do it for the greater good. We see some of that in Asia, South Korea. They've been able to bring COVID down significantly because they understand the importance of everyone having to wear a mask and everyone to social distance. And it seems like we preach it here, and to this day I still go into stores and people don't have masks on, or they become a chin garment, or they become a neck warmer of sorts, which are really defeating the purpose. So I hope that we can, look to those countries and what they've done successfully and not have to repeat the same mistakes. Let's go adopt those models. Let's adopt those best practices. And those are going to be really important for manufacturing facilities, for the logistics professionals within our organizations, to ensure that goods can keep flowing to consumers.
Okay, another one talked about the role of project management or adaptation to change and the use of the circular economy. Issues like recycling, reuse, reduction of raw materials or recovery of raw materials. And then, not in the same question, but very related, is this long-term global warming effect or climate change effect. Moving on.
So, for me, when I work with clients, I talk about the supply chain from the point of taking the material out of the ground or recycling it, getting it to your customer, then pulling it back and recycling it that way. So I work with clients on that full cycle, that circular aspect. Then at the same time, I really, really preach, I guess a lot of times it's preaching and, holding court with individuals saying you have to be efficient everywhere in the business. And that's, I hate to say this, as you reduce your lead time, you compress your lead time, the amount of resources it takes to build the product is reduced. And by focusing on that full cycle of out of the ground or recycling it and back from you, the consumer, and making sure it gets recycled, you reduce that total carbon footprint you have on the society.
Okay. And Matt, does your software allow, or can you incorporate that in? Are your customers asking for that as well, incorporating carbon footprint as part of
That's a great question. That's actually something about 9 months ago we included in an upgrade in our software, specifically based on customer requests, and that trend is we have the ability to build in carbon. You call it decarbonization is another term, CO2 emissions. So when companies do these studies, there's a lot of moving pieces from manufacturing plants and output to transportation vessels. We know what the emissions are of those. So a lot of people do solves, and they'll do a least cost solve and say, how efficient can I run my supply chain? And they can set a target. I want to also drop my carbon emissions in the next 5 years by 20%, make that a constraint, and then resolve and see what the economics and the sourcing and how things change in order to quantify the dollar cost of achieving a 20%, a carbon emissions reduction. So absolutely, we have a lot of chief sustainability officers using our software to look at their global supply chains and say, how can we reduce our impact on the environment and our net carbon output, and start to do some things differently that make a big impact globally. So yeah, technology's got to the point where we can model that. Again, it's that digital twin of the supply chain just getting more rich so we can incorporate factors like CO2 emissions.
Okay. I want to thank both of my speakers today, Matt Tichon and Art Koch. And I'm David Menachof. And let me do one little quick comment here. A couple folks have put up something about any master degree, not just ours at FAU, but do want to say that we're trying to develop a theory-led but practical approach, and the folks that do teach on our master's level programs all have industry experience. They're not just pure academics in their offices doing mathematical formulas. And I think that's been one of the things that is going to make our program quite interesting and valuable for folks. I mean, I go back and am able to include my very first job at Abbott Laboratories in their finished goods distribution. Obviously, methods have changed, but the basic of supply chain is still there. You've got to get it there on time, don't have too much, and don't run out, and do it at a reasonable cost. And so, yes, the basics are there. The practical experience we need to try to bring into it. But yes, we definitely want to bring in real world, not just pure theory, but theory based, and apply it to those real world situations. So I appreciate those comments because it allows me to then say, yes, we are thinking about that going forward. And the industry, having been to several conferences, the CSCMP, which is the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, really appreciate the fact that we're looking at analytics as a key part of our overall degree program, because that's the next way forward. And we don't see that going anywhere soon. I think we're seeing more AI, more machine learning as we continue on. So that I appreciate all. And I guess I will turn it back to Kelly to close out our session. But again, I thank all of you for attending, and we'll have it recorded and placed online. So Kelly, back to you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today, and I will keep you all posted with additional webinars that come up throughout the summer. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on today.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.